I proposed to the girl of my dreams, but her mother never thought I was worth anything because I simply did not make much money. Living in a Middle Eastern country comes with certain traditions that just feel unfair. One of them is marriage within large families where girls marry their distant relatives. I had the same problem, as I had a crush on a girl, Sarah, in university for the entire 4 years, but never got the guts to actually confront her with my feelings. I wanted to wait until after graduation and after I got a job. Good job, since I'll have to propose to her right away. And engagement here is basically like the dating phase. The thing was, I knew that her mother was pretty strict, and because her dad was dead, her mother was a bit controlling. Fast forward to after graduation, and I get a decent job in sales. It's nothing special as it's an entry-level job, meaning there's no way I could afford much on its salary. But it was a reputable company, and it did have interesting prospects. After a few months, I worked up the courage to take the decision to go propose to her and try to convince her mom that we stay engaged for a couple of years, until I sort things out and try to make enough money. I went to go and meet Sarah's mom, and it was probably one of the worst days of my life. She kept asking me about all the money, my job, my salary, how much money my father made, and if we owned any land. I was there alone, and I was very embarrassed that I had none of this. I kept answering no, and she kept getting more and more arrogant, constantly asking her daughter what she sees in me, and what benefit would I even bring to the table. She even commented on the quality of the blazer I was wearing and the cheap cake I brought with me. Oh my gosh. She humored me, asking what my plan was, and I told her that her daughter and I would get engaged for a couple years until I make enough money, and she laughed out loud, literally in my face. Sarah had gotten so embarrassed that she went inside her room, clearly crying. The mom had to finish me off by telling me that I was a loser with no real job and that there's no way in heck she would ever accept me. I asked her if it was solely because of money and she accept a rich abuser if he proposed to her daughter instead, and she promptly asked me to get out. I was hurt and offended, but I left with my dignity intact and tried to call the girl 1,000,000 times, but she wouldn't answer. We stayed like this for a few days. I was genuinely depressed and unable to do anything productive. I took a couple of days off from work and I was barely eating. I was asleep most of the days and my parents had to keep consoling me and telling me that family did not deserve me. I told them how I felt such lack of worth, as Sarah genuinely saw me as a good person and I would have done anything for her. My mom told me that money is never an indicator of somebody's value, as it's only a tool in the man's arsenal, just like his morals, values, and ideology. Still, even though I was convinced that my mom was right, I could barely get out of the house. I became so self-conscious about money that when I got back to work, I was constantly obsessing over people's cars, clothes, how they got to where they were. I started getting closer to my director since he was the richest guy I knew. After a couple of weeks, I got word from Sarah's friends that her mom was planning on marrying her off to a distant relative who was loaded. As his family also had a ton of money, I asked her friends what she thought about this and told me that she was traumatized and refused intensely. But her mother insisted and pretty much was using this as an excuse to A, get money, and B, get her daughter out of her house as soon as she can. Another toxic tradition over here is that the mother are in a strange race with her sisters and cousins on who gets to marry off their daughter first. I knew that Sarah would not answer my calls, so I went to the library where she worked and confronted her. She broke down in tears right then and there as she saw me and asked me why I was there. I told her that there's no way she was marrying that relative of hers, but she told me that her mother was being absolutely crazy and insisting on it. I told her that I would do anything to convince her mom otherwise, but she was hopeless and told me there's simply no way. I went straight to her mom's house afterward, and we met with some aggressiveness as before. She asked me why I was there, and unless I miraculously inherited a fortune, I should leave right now. I told her that I wasn't even here to talk about marriage, but to tell her that she should not force her daughter to marry someone she doesn't want. She told me that I don't know anything and that this was none of my business. I warned her that if she goes down this route, she will lose her daughter forever and will have to handle the consequences. I felt a smidge of fear glance in her eyes because she knew I was right but didn't want to admit it. I told her that she would not be seeing me again, but that she would do the right thing before it was too late. I know of it. I left and decided not to get involved with this and tried to move on. It was, though, a period of about 5 months where I tried as much as possible to just forget Sarah and focus on my job. And by the end of it, I was confident that I'd gotten over her. All of this, though, changed in an instant when I got a call from Sarah. Apparently, she tried to hurt herself. So I rushed over to the hospital to see what the heck was going on, and as soon as I entered the ICU, I saw her mother and a fancy-looking gentleman about my age. I instantly knew who he was and had a good guess of what happened. Her mother did not talk to me, and once Sarah finally woke up, she refused to talk to her mother and privately told me and the doctor there that he tried to hurt her with pills on the day of her engagement because she did not want the marriage to her relative to happen. I went out and told her mother, who scoffed at the idea at first, but her daughter confirmed it and told her, in front of the guy, that if she ever tried to have her marry him again, she would not end up in the hospital this time because she will end it fast. Her mother asked the guy to leave and in tears told her that she would not go through with the marriage. Sarah, though, took it a step further and told her that she'll approve of her marriage to me, which came as a surprise to me, who had been trying to move on for the last few months, and now all this is happening. The look on her mother's face shifted, but she begrudgingly accepted and gave us the coldest congratulations ever. Sarah left the hospital a day later, and we started talking about the future. I took my parents to go meet her mom again, and this time she was clearly pretending to be friendly and approving of the marriage. She told us that we can be engaged for no less than a year, and that we would not take the next step until I had enough money, to which I agreed. She also said that I'll have to buy everything, that her daughter will only leave the house with her suitcase. It was difficult, but we agreed. Sarah and I were finally engaged, and future looked somewhat bright, but you know what they say, that's always short-lived. My future mother-in-law started using our engagement as an excuse to bleed me dry. She started inviting me over a lot, knowing that I can't come without bringing some sort of present or maybe a cake. She invited me to the birthdays of the entire family since I also had to come with a present. The worst, though, was yet to come, as she started treating me like her own personal driver. I started using my dad's old 90s Fiat, which she made fun of repeatedly, but she also had me driving her around every other day. She told me that if I wanted to have a good marriage, I needed to get on the mother-in-law's good side. She was starting to turn into a thorn in my side. I went to my mom to tell her about the whole thing, and she told me that I just have to endure the torture until we got married. I'd have to say, perhaps the worst that she did was invite me and my mom to a restaurant with her. Sarah and Sarah's uncles, who were here from out of town, she told me that it was her treat because I had done so much for her and she wanted to do something nice for me. I bought it, and she took us to this crazy fancy restaurant midtown. Just looking at the menu was shocking. I had no idea how she could afford to pay. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, while she got steak, sides, drinks, and even dessert. It was a pretty packed place, and I think you know where I'm going with this. I kept glancing at Sarah, and she understood what I was wondering about, but she kept shrugging and didn't know what to do. We finally finished eating, and she asked for the check. The waiter came, and she told him to hand it to me with a devilish smile on her face. I was in front of everyone, and of course I couldn't say a word. But her saying that it was her treat, especially with me being in front of Sarah's uncles. I looked at my mom in distress, but she didn't know what to do either. The entire time, my mother-in-law, who was smiling, I think we should nickname her Devilish Smile, and seemed to greatly enjoy this whole thing. I had to pay with my credit card, hoping that it doesn't get rejected, and pretty much maxed it out right then and there. When I went home, Sarah called me and apologized maybe a million times. But she did not know what to do about her mother, Devilish Smile, either. We agreed that we once got married, we would move to another town and get as far away from her as possible, as this could only get worse once we have our own place. I imagined her showing up at her door every day with crazy demands. I was sick of her and had to do something to get her off my back. Well, work, it was going well, but it wasn't anything special. It was more of the same. About 7 months had passed and my mother-in-law started asking me questions about said house, the wedding, the preparations, and I was clearly not ready yet. I told her that I was just waiting for things at work to pick up a bit more, and she told me that I wasn't doing anything to advance this stage. She told me that I can't stay engaged to Sarah like this forever without the promise of the future. It made sense, but I was even angrier now. I went to my director and started talking to him. This led to a presentation for a project I had that I presented straight to the CEO a month later. And let me tell you, he was impressed. So impressed, in fact, he decided I should run the project as its own entity in the company. This meant, well, let me just say, a massive promotion for me, and I was over the moon. The director told me he would have a formal promotion party for me at a restaurant, and that I should bring my fiancée. I went straight to Sarah to give her the good news, but we agreed not to tell her mom at all, and especially not about the party, as we know she would probably try to ruin it. Well, a few days later, we were having dinner with her mom, and her mom went back to her antics, constantly asking embarrassing questions and making me feel bad about my job. In the middle of the conversation, with Sarah being so angry, her little tongue slipped, and she mentioned the promotion party we were going to. Oh, devilish grin. Her mother's eyes widened, and she acted all happy and giddy, and surprised, and flat out invited herself, telling me that she'd be honored to come. She asked where it was, and I had to think fast. So I gave her the name of some random restaurant. She didn't know it. So I told her I'd send her the location right before the party, which is in 3 days. On the day of the party, I knew this was my chance to get back at her for everything she's done. I chose the worst neighborhood possible. I sent her a location to a deserted area with no restaurants in sight. I told her that I have to go to the party early and can't pick her up, so she would have to get there on her own if she wants to come. Sarah told her that she had something to do and would be a bit late. When the time came, Sarah and I went to the party at the real restaurant and completely ignored her mother. After about an hour, we look at the phone to 23 missed calls from her mom, devilish grin, and a million messages asking us where this place was. It was worse than it started. Raining outside, and I knew there was no place for her to stay in the neighborhood. I turned off my phone, flicked it to airplane mode, and enjoyed the party for a good 2 hours. Until Sarah got a call from the police station. We picked up immediately and they asked us to come down to the station. We were terrified. We left the party early just to go there. We entered the station and found her mom soaking wet, looking like a wet dog, in tears, sitting down on one of the benches with her head between her knees, absolutely defeated. We asked what happened and the officer started explaining. He told us that my mother-in-law was a victim of a mugging, and that she called the station from a grocery store after a 20-minute walk away, and they came to pick her up. My mother-in-law glanced at us in our fancy clothes and immediately knew that we had fooled her, bamboozled, and that we went to a real party. We asked what was stolen, and the muggers took her bag, phone, and all her jewelry, which she was covered in head to toe, obviously to impress my boss. We went to talk with mother-in-law, and she barely muttered a word. She told me that she was sorry for everything she's done, and that she did not realize how cruel she had been until she was staring down the edge of a knife from these muggers. She told us that she was legitimately in fear of her life, and that she regretted everything she did, thinking that it was her final moment on this rock. We told her that she had no right to treat me this horribly this whole time, making my life an absolute nightmare. We told her that I got the promotion and that we've been getting married in a couple of months, and that we should also be moving to another town so that she could not keep bothering us. This is when she broke down in tears and asked Sarah if she would leave her alone in this cold world. And Sarah told her that she had left her no choice for all the pain she's caused her. A couple months later, Sarah and I had our wedding, and we did not invite her mother-in-law. Even though all of Sarah's friends knew, when the wedding finished, we went outside in the car and saw her mother standing outside in the cold, just to have a look at her daughter in a dress. The security guard told us that she stood there the entire wedding, but he had strict orders not to let her inside. We got like 2 seconds of eye contact with her from the car, and we left. We lived in another town, and other than replying to her messages, my mother-in-law never visits us and only called Sarah, never me. Okay, so yes, I can agree, this mother-in-law is absolutely a nightmare. But I need to know from you guys, do you feel any sorts of regret that this old lady was mugged, stole for all her rich outfit or whatnot she had, her phone taken, jewelry taken, and she was left in the rain a crying mess? If you say no, that's okay. If you say yes, that's okay. I just want to know your opinion of this story. Drop it down below and tell me exactly what you would have done if you were in OP's position. Guys, thank you for tuning in on this story. I hope each and every one of you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a big ol' like on this video. Maybe even subscribe. And hey, I'll catch you in the next one.